Welcome to the Granblue Fantasies Beginners to Pro tutorial video. These videos will help you become a fundamentally better player in Granblue Fantasy from Scrub to Pro. As we progress through each video, the tutorials will increasingly get harder and harder, going from beginner to intermediate subjects. From that point, let's continue with the video and start with the basics. Friendly warning though, these videos are for people who are just getting into the game or are beginners at fighting game fundamental cores. If you just want to become a better player at fighting games, this game in particular will help you with some tips and tricks. Let's get on with it. In Granblue Fantasy, the game is structured as a 2D, 3D fighting game in which characters can move up, down, left, right, diagonally, jump, walk, and etc. Some characters can walk faster and run faster than others. That all depends on which one you actually play. To walk in Granblue Fantasy, simply press forward or back movement buttons on your controller or stick and your character will initiate a walk. To run, simply double tap the buttons and you'll actually perform a run instead of walking. If you want to jump, press the up button and your character will initiate a jump. If you want to crouch, hold down and your character will crouch. To backdash, you have to press the back button, double tapping it as if you're doing a run, and your character will do a backdash. While in this state, you're actually intangible of grabs. So, for example, if your opponent continuously likes to grab you, you can backdash it and it will actually beat opponents doing a grab towards you. To perform a super jump, you hold down and then you press up immediately afterwards. Doing a super jump, your character is actually in a status where they jump higher and they cover more distance than the normal jump. While running in Granblue Fantasy, characters are actually sliding at the end of the animations when they stop running. During this state, you actually can't block for a slight moment. If you want to prevent this situation from happening, you actually have to throw out a normal attack that cancels the animation. Thus, they'll also leave you open in case you whiff. So you have to pick and choose when it's best to run in this game. Or in moments like in Fireball Wars, if you decide to run, you could end up dying because of the fact that you slid and you didn't have time to block. So you have to be really careful and mindful of that. In Granblue Fantasy, there are two ways to block in this game. Either A works. In the traditional way, you will simply hold the back button back to block while standing, or you will hold down back to block while crouching. Then there's also a block button by simply pressing your block button however you have it set up. In Granblue Fantasy, if you're blocking standing, high attacks and aerial attacks are blockable, but low attacks is vulnerable. While crouching, high attacks and low attacks are blockable, but aerial attacks and generic overheads are unblockable. Knowing those things, you will have to understand that there are situations where you will feel like, oh wait, I know I blocked it. You will have to go into training mode and realize what happened, and you will realize how the setup worked or how you blocked something incorrectly. The block button, on the other hand, you wouldn't lose space because you're just pressing a block button for you. Having a block button actually beats cross-ups too, since your character isn't holding back and you won't be moving towards the other side if they were to cross you up. So there are certain situations where you would rather just use the block button since it defeats cross-ups. Be mindful of those. On the other hand, what using the block button doesn't give you is Just Defend. Just Defend, your character will flash in a highlighted white color. If you use the traditional options, you will actually get rewarded from doing that. To do it, you have to block a few frames before the actual attack hits your character. Once you perform that, it's almost kind of useless, unfortunately. you get 1% more meter than you would normally get, regardless of any move. So if a move hits you and it gives you 10% meter, it will now give you 11. It's not a big loss and it's not that much of a big deal, so this is actually not important, but nonetheless something you could use in very situational moments, unless they buff it in future patches. In Granblue Fantasy, there are two different evasion options within the game. One of them is crossover. Crossover is an option when your character moves forward to gain some invulnerability in case you want to get out of a sticky situation. You would mainly be using this in fireball wars when you want to close in the distance between you and your opponent, or to escape a certain situation in the corner that you're not very comfortable in. It gives you iframes upon activation, so you'll be invulnerable towards certain moves. On the other hand, you're not completely invulnerable to anything. Crossover loses to low attacks and grabs, so you have to be using it sparingly and know which situation you should be using it best. And then there is evade. Evade is that you dodge in place. You will use evade to avoid chip damage kills, or you can also use it as a secondary option in case that you don't want to use crossover, so that may vary upon your experience. Evade is also extremely good. It has invulnerability of any physical attack in the game, regardless if it's low, mid, or an overhead or whatever. You'll go right through it. The only thing it would lose to is grabs, so you have to do it sparingly and not make it too predictable. In Granblue Fantasy, there are three versions of grabs in the game. There's forward grab, there's back grab, and air grab. To perform a grab, you will have to press light and unique attack at the same time. To do a back grab, you just have to hold back and press the grab button. And in the air, you have to jump and initiate a grab while you're airborne. To break a grab, the defender will have to press the grab button at the same time as you did. Once a grab has initiated, if the defender breaks at the same time, both of you are in a state where you're in neutral. Neutral means that no one is at a disadvantage or advantageous state. If the defender breaks the grab late, on the other hand, the defender is put into a disadvantaged state, meaning that he will recover longer compared to the aggressor. Now when you're in the air, no matter how late or how early you take the grab, both opponents will be considered neutral and be spaced away from each other. I should say that if you whiff a grab, you will be punished. You have a very long recovery animation and you really don't want to do that. So you should be very careful when doing this. A command grab is very character specific. Not everyone have one. A command grab is an unbreakable grab that does more damage than generic grab. Typically wrestler characters have this and it dishes a lot of damage, and usually the aggressor who have done it are advantageous. So be very careful in these situations. Mind you, I should repeat that you cannot break them. In Granblue Fantasy, there are 5 different attack buttons in the game. There's light attack, medium attack, heavy attack, unique skill, and skill button. All of these you'll be utilizing in a different way depending on your character. Light attacks are the fastest one in the game, but they usually lack range, and they also don't deal a lot of damage. Medium attacks are the ones that are slightly slower than light attacks, but they have much more range, and you will usually be using these moves in neutral or spaced out a little further from your light attack. These are the ones you'll be using more as pokes. Heavy attacks, on the other hand, are the slowest in the game, but they deal the most damage. They're the ones you use in very harsh punishes and will dish out the most damage. You can also use these in your combos as well, which are very character dependent. Unique attack is, as the name implies, is a unique attack specific for that character that other characters cannot do. You will have to experiment and play every character to know what they do, but simply as the name says, is a unique attack that only they can do. Using your skills require you to do their inputs. For example, Grand's Fireball is quarter circle forward, light, medium, or heavy. That goes for any character. You have to do the motion associated to do their skill. Once you do it, there is a quick cooldown where you cannot use it. If you use the simple version by pressing R1, you'll be using the assisted version, which does the input for you, and it gives you more cooldown than normally. This is the game trying to give you the incentive that you should use the normal version, but if you don't know how to do it or is still struggling, then this is an easier way for you, but you would eventually need to know how to do it because you could really be losing some matches with that additional cooldown. Now, next will be the enhanceable version. To do an enhanceable version, you cannot do it on symbol. You have to do the intended input with the heavy attack. By doing the heavy attack, you will get an enhanced version that gives you increased properties of that move. Mind you, you have also increased cooldown than you would normally, so you should use these sparingly. You could end up killing yourself if you do these at really bad times. Every character has two versions of their normal attacks, the far and close versions. Far is when you're not exactly touching the character, so you get a far version of it, but you can't link another normal into it. While close, you get a close version, but if you keep pressing the attack button, you get an auto combo. Far versions cannot get an auto combo. Last is the generic overhead. The generic overhead is by pressing medium and heavy at the same time. Generic overheads are moves that are unblockable if the opponent is crouching low. If you get it on normal hit, you're simply advantageous. But if you get it on counter hit, you can get a free combo off of that, which is really powerful if you think your opponent is going to flinch. Be careful though, if it is blocked, you lose your turn because it is unsafe. You can cancel generic overheads into any normal, so if you do a normal, you can cancel it into a generic overhead. Be careful though that generic overheads can be checked by opponents who see it, so they can press a crouching light to interrupt it. Alrighty guys, we made it at the end of the video, and that is it for video 1, which is pretty much the introduction of the game. Hopefully this helps you out. You made it to the end. If you liked it, well, here I am. Give it a like and subscribe. If not, give it a thumbs down and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Be ready for the next coming videos. That will be more Granblue content in the future. This is Kyron Dudebro signing off. Have a good one.